Hello everyone, I call myself Zondagskind and I like to pretend that I know a lot about Civilization VI. On Discord, a viewer asked me some questions about how to get ahead in domination games, because he thought that he was struggling with science. It actually turned out his yields were okay compared to my games, but he was getting to his unique units a little late. I kind of generalized for him that in domination games you want to plan around your unique unit, and of course his follow-up question was how to do this. But with more than 50 unique units from different eras, how do you teach people to do this? That's going to take at least 33 minutes and multiple example segments. Well, that's what I'm going to try and do today. So if you like learning about this game and don't mind me overthinking things, be sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel. I have ideas for more tutorial videos like this, and the very next video is going to be a unique unit tier list. To lay down some rules for this video, I play on deity difficulty single player mode. I vary in victory conditions as well as map types and sizes, and on average my domination games take about 180 turns. I'll start with the basics. What are unique units? This might be repetitive for more experienced players, but it's useful to establish some of the relevant terms. I'll then offer a general formula for using unique units insofar as that is possible, and follow it up with a couple of examples of unique units and how to use them. I live streamed these demonstration games on twitch.tv/Zondagskind, and some of the units were specifically requested by viewers. They aren't necessarily the best unique units to do offensive pushes with, but I try to vary between different types and eras of units. So, what even is a unique unit? Civ VI has 77 different kits, which consist of a leader ability, a civ ability, a unique infrastructure, be it an improvement district or building, and at least one unique unit. All civs have their own unit, let's call them national units, and some leaders also have their own unique unit, let's call them personal units. This is how you end up with civs like Macedon, who have 2 unique units. Now for them, Alexander is the only pickable leader, so which one is the national unit and which one is the personal unit is kind of a trivia question. But for the Byzantines, it's relevant to know that both leaders will have access to the Dromon, but only Basil will unlock the Tagma. Most units replace a generic unit and often take up their spot on the technology or civic tree. For example, while most civs will start with a warrior that upgrades into a swordsman that upgrades into a man-at-arms, Rome replaces the swordsman with the legion, which unlocks at the same spot as the generic swordsman, namely at ironworking. This also means you can upgrade a generic warrior into the unique legion. I call this the pre-unique, and if you've ever watched a video on unit rushes, the term pre-building will become important later. Something less talked about is how the unique unit can then upgrade into a generic later unit, which I will call its post-unique. Generally speaking, unique units will tend to have stronger combat and or range strength than the unit they replace, but there can also be other benefits. Some units have added range, movement or sight. They might cost less upfront or in maintenance, and some might have special benefits like a free promotion or a unique ability. Sometimes a unit will also have drawbacks, like a higher production cost or unchanged combat strength, which is usually meant to offset another bonus that would be overpowering if left unpunished. Some units even build an improvement, but how to use them is beyond the scope of this video. 2 things are important to note. Sometimes a unit will replace a generic unit but not unlock at the same place. Like the Romans, the Maori replaced the swordsman with their unique unit, the Toa, but it unlocks at construction. The man-at-arms, meanwhile, is replaced by 3 unique units, none of which unlock at apprenticeship. The Berserker and the Gefsur unlock at the military tactics technology, and the Samurai unlocks at the feudalism civic. And some units don't replace a generic unit at all, and we sometimes call these super uniques. They never have pre-uniques, and sometimes the post-unique is farther down the road than you'd expect. For example, even though you unlock knights after Varu, the Varu does not upgrade into them, but, together with the knight, into a cuirassier. With those basics out of the way, you will know what I'm talking about when I throw around these terms like pre-unique and post-unique. How can you make the most out of the unique units in 7 steps? Well, each unique unit is different, but generally speaking, read, unlock, pre-build and or discount, balance, fight and preserve. Step 1. Read and decide what the unit is supposed to do for you. Generally speaking, on deity difficulty, the AI's bonuses are too strong to overwhelm them in the ancient or early classical era, especially if they can field their own unique units. It's in the medieval era that the momentum shifts to the human player, so ancient and classical units often help you defend and or fight against barbarians, while medieval and renaissance units are stronger on the offense, assuming they are equally buffed from the generic unit. By the Industrial Era, you're usually on the way to winning already, so past the Renaissance Era, unique units are generally game accelerators rather than deciders. The unit type may give you some clues about what the Civ wants to do with them. Melee, anti-cavalry, and siege units point towards taking cities. Ranged units point towards defense. Cavalry are great at combat and raiding but struggle to conquer cities. Naval units, naturally, excel on water-rich maps. Recon units point away from war altogether and towards exploration, and some units have economic benefits which outshine their combat capabilities. Check whether the rest of the kit points towards domination or not. Does a leader or civ give combat bonuses? Is their unique infrastructure part of the encampment? Also, check ahead whether beelining your unique unit makes sense for the civ as a whole. For example, Civ VI goes straight to horseback riding, no questions asked, while India and Macedon have good reasons to go for other technologies. Era score is a thing for all civilizations, but some need it more than others. That benefit weighs more heavily in the earlier eras, and whether you need it also depends on when your unit and infrastructure unlock. Step 2. Find the path of least resistance towards unlocking the unit. The earlier the unit unlocks, the more you go straight for it. For ancient and classical units, it makes sense to just focus on the appropriate Eurekas without building campuses. For medieval and later units, it can be useful to boost your per turn science output with campuses. It's usually beneficial if a unit unlocks in the civics tree, but it also requires a more culture-driven approach, and civics are harder to boost than technologies. Do not beeline to your overall detriment. If you need a religion, stop off at astrology. If you need plantations, go to irrigation. Try to plan ahead how to make the path as easy as possible. It might be worth it to stop off for a technology that isn't on the way to your unit if you can use that time to get to Eureka and make back the time you lost. Step 3, if possible, build your pre-unique unit, aka pre-building, and get experience on them. Pre-building means that you produce the unit that the unique unit upgrades into, rather than producing the unit themselves. You can also do this with generic units. I personally like to get 3 slingers and upgrade them into archers and crossbowmen regardless of whether a unique unit is ranged, but it's especially beneficial with unique units, and you'll often hear content creators talk about pre-building when strategizing how to use their unique unit. Note that super uniques cannot be upgraded into, so that part of the strategy does not apply to them. Building pre-uniques has the following benefits. 1. Your unit can already have promotions from previous experience. 2. You can upgrade units anywhere in your own or allied territory, whereas you can only produce units in your own cities. And 3. Upgrading a unit is instantaneous, whereas producing units can take several turns. All of this means that using pre-uniques gives you a more experienced army that reaches the front line you want earlier than if you wait producing until you hit your unique unit. If you can upgrade units, try to unlock the cards that discount upgrades, the first of which sits behind the Mercenary Civic. Note that upgrade costs depend on the production cost of a unit, and some unique units' production costs are different from their generic counterpart, so the upgrade costs from your pre-unique to your unique unit to your post-unique might be different from what you expect. For example, the Pitati Archer is more expensive than the regular Archer, so upgrading from a Slinger to it costs 80 gold rather than 60. Losing a pre-unique unit stings all the more if your unique unit is very good, so especially if you're on the home stretch to your unique unit, just keep your units alive. 4. When producing units, try to discount unit production with the right policy cards. For melee, anti-cavalry and ranged units, the first of these, Agoge, unlocks behind craftsmanship. For cavalry units, the first one, maneuver, unlocks behind military tradition. For naval units, the first one, maritime industries, unlocks behind foreign trade. Reconnaissance and siege units production cannot be boosted with policy cards. Getting the relevant encampment and or harbor buildings can help produce units faster and give them more experience, and occasionally the World Congress can make it cheaper to produce units. Note that siege units do benefit from the stable by virtue of extra experience. As with everything in Civ that's worth to build, chopping can help you churn out an army in very little time, especially with Magnus established. Alternatively, you can try to get units from a city with Victor and his Embrasure promotion to get units with a free promotion, although I find that a relatively niche strategy. 5. Find the right number of unique units to field. Even if your unit is bad or unnecessary, getting 1 for the era score is good practice. If your unit is useful, I recommend fielding a minimum of 3. For recon, siege and early melee units, I find this to be a good number to reach. Spamming these units too much risks delaying other important infrastructure too much, and there are only so many tiles you can put units on anyway. For ranged and later melee units, I recommend going for circa 6 units, assuming the terrain allows for large fronts and rotating units at the front. The mobility of navy and cavalry units makes them more spammable, and the number you get depends more on whether you need other unit types to balance the army. An army of exclusively one unit type rarely works out well. Make sure to field a military in which your unique unit shines, but is also supported by relevant complementary units. 6. Fight smarter, not harder. In Wars of Conquest, keep your units together for flanking and support bonuses. Note that these unlock at military training. Great generals and admirals do not affect ancient era units, and not all classical era units are conducive to getting them, but if you can boost your army with them, do so. A great way to produce yourself a better army is by building the Terracotta Army to give all existing units a free promotion, and Alhambra, or Forbidden City, can help you get more military policy slots. Be clever about combat. A unit that gets to live and fight another day is usually worth more than a Pyrrhic victory. Better to retreat and come back stronger than lose your units on an ill-conceived attack. 7. Preserve your unique units to also be useful after their time in the limelight. Presumably, your unique unit is stronger and is able to be promoted more than its generic counterpart. Because of this, your post-unique will often have more use than you might expect. Basically, a Roman man-at-arms, the Legion's post-unique, is better than a man-at-arms for most civs. This is something that tends not to get too much attention, but this is a huge reason that having an early unique unit is great, even if it's harder to bring the fire to the AI early into the game. So that's the theory behind the unique units. Now let's try to put it into practice by looking at 6 examples. The Mayan Hul'che, the Greek Hoplite, the Polish Winged Hussar, the Japanese Samurai, the Indian Varu, and the Byzantine Dromon. Like I said in the intro, these aren't necessarily the best units to do offensive pushes with. These games were merely to demonstrate how you would do an offensive push with these units. So, let's start with the Mayan Hul'che, and let's start by reading what it actually does. It replaces the Archer, and like the Archer, it unlocks at Archery. And the 2 buffs that the Hul'che has is, first off, that it has a slightly higher ranged strength, 28 versus 25, and also that it gets an extra 5 ranged strength when fighting a wounded opponent. In the rest of the kit, there are 3 things to note, 2 of which are in Lady Sixsky's ability Ishmu Talachau. The first one, you get extra yields within 6 tiles of your capital, but fewer yields outside of that. So, as the Maya, you don't necessarily want to wipe the map clean of the opponents, you just want that zone of 6 tiles free of any interference, and that is what the Hul'che will try to do. That synergizes with the fact that you get extra combat strength within 6 tiles of the capital. That also includes ranged strength, and that means that compared to the regular Archer without any buffs, the Hul'che is actually going to have 13 extra combat strength against a wounded unit within 6 tiles of your capital. And the third thing is that the Maya have a unique campus, which means that doesn't really apply to your Archer, but from your crossbow onwards, you should generally be ahead of where you would be with another Civ, scientifically. So then, unlocking the Hul'che, it sits behind Archery, so definitely first you're going to want to go to Animal Husbandry. Then you include a Slinger somewhere in your opening build. I do like doing Scouts first, but in my test games, I went Scout, Single Slinger, Settler, Triple Slinger, and Scout, Triple Slinger, Settler, respectively. And then you're going to want to try and find a unit to kill with your Slinger, usually a Barbarian to boost Archery. If you can't do that in the time you get to the boost point for Archery, it's definitely a good idea to stop off for Pottery, because Pottery also leads towards your Observatory and towards unlocking plantations which boost your Observatory. So for the Mayan kit, if you have to divert, it's definitely to Pottery. So then, step 3, you should have some Slingers on the board by the time you unlock the Hul'che, and then you can just upgrade into them with 60 gold. I did that on turn 24 and 35 respectively in the games that I tested them out. And if you do have to produce them, and you might want to produce some after you've unlocked them, the aggregate card sits behind Craftsmanship. Even in completely passive games, you'll want at least 3 Hul'che to boost machinery, since that boosts with 3 archers. But if you want to go for a push, there's nothing wrong with doing a little bit of overkill. In my second demonstration game, I went a little overboard just to demonstrate the unit. It did help us to take out one city. In terms of fighting smarter, that 6-tile radius around your capital is of course the zone where your Hul'che will do the most damage. For example, in the first demonstration game, we just one-shot a barbarian scout. But of course, the AI will not always be in that 6-tile radius unless they are attacking into you. And so near the end of their lifespan, you do have to be careful with the Hul'che, since they are not buffed in melee compared to regular archers. So especially if they're outside that 6-tile zone, near the end of their lifespan, once you're attacking towards machinery, they start to fall off pretty hard, and you need to rush towards machinery if you want to keep that front line alive. So in summary, get 3 slingers early, upgrade them into Hul'che by beelining to archery, and once you have that baseline of Hul'che out, start making your way slowly yet surely towards machinery by help of your observatories. Then let's look at the Greek Hoplite. It has 28 melee strength compared to the 25 that the Spearman has, and it gets an extra 10 once you place it next to another Hoplite. If that 13 strength swing isn't enough for you, then you can play with Gorgo as their leader. Her personal ability, Thermopylae, gives you 1 combat strength for every military policy slotted. In practice, this is going to mean 1 or 2 extra combat strength in the Ancient Era, and then once you get to Political Philosophy, 3 or 4 extra combat strength. And she also has an amazing incentive to go to war, namely that you get culture for your combat victories, so you want to fight, be it against barbarians or against other civs. The Hoplite unlocks behind bronzeworking, which you want to boost by killing 3 barbarians. So your opener is relatively aggressive. You're going to maybe even build a warrior, definitely a slinger as well, and hunt for barbarians. Meanwhile, you're probably going to attack mining first in the hopes that you'll boost bronzeworking super early. And in terms of the civics, a very important one is craftsmanship again, because Agoga also boosts anti-cavalry and thereby your Hoplite. With that setup, you should comfortably be able to unlock Hoplite in the Ancient Era and still build them in the Ancient Era as well. In both my test games, I got the first Hoplite at turn 44. So how many Hoplite do you build? Because in most games, I don't build any Spearmen. Well, you definitely build 2 at the bare minimum, because they need to be adjacent to each other to give each other extra combat strength. Beyond that, it's always tricky with early units. You'd love to get like 5, but you don't have the time to produce that many. I would say get at least 3, so that if one is wounded, you can still cycle them out. But in my first test game, that wasn't even possible. I had to go to war early because I was facing the Meier with the Hul'che, which, if you just remember, is hell to attack into in the Ancient Era. And that is the fragility of the Hoplite. If one of them dies and the other one isn't next to any other Hoplite, then it's basically game over for your Hoplite push. So you have to have them stick together, and you have to make sure that either both of them stay alive or there's an extra Hoplite still waiting in the wings to help out. The Hoplites definitely excel in open terrain. That is generally the case. War is easier in open terrain, but especially because the Hoplites want to be adjacent to one another, it's nice to have room to maneuver your front. That's what we noticed in the second game. I was doing a Hoplite push against Russia. It went really easy on the cities that were on plains, but then I tried to attack into a city that was surrounded by mountains. Also, by that time, Russia had teched up towards catapults, horsemen, and swordsmen, and then it does become really tricky. Then we get to the Polish Winged Hussar, and it has 3 buffs over the cuirassier it replaces. It has the exact same stats, but it costs less iron, 10 instead of 20. It pushes defending enemy units back from their hacks when they score more damage, and if they can't move back, they suffer additional damage. But most importantly, the Winged Hussar does not unlock at Ballistics. The Winged Hussar unlocks in the Civics tree at Mercantilism. Then, looking at the rest of the kit, experienced players probably already know what I'm about to say here. Poland has some incentives to try and make a crusade play work, because with Poland's ability, if you place an encampment on somebody else's border, it gets a culture bomb, and then with Jadwiga's ability, they also get your majority religion. Which, since you have a little bit better holy sites, you will probably have a religion, and you can try to make a crusade play work with that. I'm actually going to focus on the Sukienice, because it is actually quite important in unlocking the Winged Hussar. Because you want to get to mercantilism, and there's a bunch of civics, and I'm not going to talk about boosting all of them, but 3 of them are directly related to your Sukienitze. Medieval fairs maintain 4 trade routes. A Sukienitze gives you a trade route capacity. Guilds build 2 markets, with the Sukienitze is a replacement of. And mercantilism earn a great merchant, which the Sukienitze gives you points for. So the Sukienitze will help you clear the way towards your winged hussar much faster than if you don't have a commercial hub or market replacement. You'll definitely want to have a culture-driven approach. In the 2 test games I did, one was on stream, and my viewer Comreal from Poland, so he's an expert of course, suggested that I do the pantheon goddess of festivals for the extra culture from plantations, and in one that I did off stream, I was able to get choral music as a religion to get extra culture on my holy site buildings, and that really does help you get to winged hussars faster. Meanwhile, you're keeping your eye out especially for meteor showers as Poland, because that is a heavy cavalry unit and that can be upgraded into a winged hussar later, and you're definitely going to want to build some knights, so stirrups is an important tech, because then you have some heavy cavalry ready to upgrade into winged hussars. Therefore, even though you could potentially skip mercenaries while on your way to winged hussars, I wouldn't recommend that, and I also wouldn't recommend skipping your tier 2 government. I would recommend going to monarchy, especially because it has the policy card where you can get more production on your heavy cavalry, which you can either use on your knights or when you unlock the winged hussar on the hussar itself. In theory, you could spam winged hussars to your heart's content, but by this point, definitely the AI will have walls. And so you're going to want to be clever about this. You're going to also have some melee units. You're going to have some siege units, some range units. So realistically, I think you're going to have 3, 4, 5 winged hussars. And that's enough to make an impact on the battlefield. In terms of fighting smarter, there's actually an interesting consequence of the winged hussar unlocking at mercantilism. It is classed as a Renaissance era unit rather than an industrial era unit. And because of that, great generals which boost units of the medieval and Renaissance era do boost winged hussars, whereas they wouldn't boost cuirassiers. I think preserving your units is less of a focus with the winged hussar, because by this point you will probably have built the Grandmaster's Chapel, so as long as you get enough faith out of pillaging with your winged hussars, even if they were to die, you could just replace them with new ones. And the next unit, the post-unique, is the tank. At which point, in my experience, promotions don't really matter that much anymore. The more incremental change is nationalism, at which point you can get cores, and seeing as you're at mercantilism already, that should only be 3 civics, maybe like 10 turns away. So relatively soon you will be able to core up your winged hussars, and that will be another little boost. So in summary, focus on culture, make sure you get your Sukienitze to boost the relevant civics, and make sure you have your heavy cavalry ready when the winged hussars arrive to push forward and then get to nationalism. For our 4th example, we go to the Japanese samurai. It replaces the man-at-arms, but it does not unlock at apprenticeship in the tech tree, but rather feudalism in the civics tree. It needs 10 iron less at 10 iron, it has 3 combat strength more at 48, but most importantly it does not suffer combat penalties when damaged. For reference, if your unit has 10 health left, it will suffer 9 points of combat strength as a malus, and the samurai will not do that. So in a battle of attrition between 2 heavily damaged units, the samurai will come out on top. If that isn't enough combat strength for you, then you can pick Hojo Tokimone as your leader. He gives your units extra combat strength in land tiles adjacent to coast, and also it helps that he builds encampment, holy site, and theater squares districts in half the time. Especially the encampment and theater squares, they are of course very nice to get your great generals and to get your culture yield going. In my test game, I actually built a couple of theater squares next to the government plaza to boost my culture yield. Like the winged hussar, the samurai unlocks in the civics tree, and so you're focusing more on culture than you would if your unique unit is in the tech tree. You're even more focused on getting your monuments early, and of course a pantheon can also help. In this test game, I took God of the Open Sky for culture from pastures, which of course also helps getting to feudalism just that little bit sooner. In this test game, we got there at turn 87, which I wouldn't even say is that amazing. You can do faster if you have a bit of a lucky spawn or if you're just better than I am. But yeah, turn 87 I think is a good thing to at least aim for, to try to get the start of the medieval era. Both upgrading and producing samurai shouldn't be too hard. Mercenaries is right around the corner from feudalism, so you can just go up there and upgrade your swordsman. And if you do want to produce samurai, feudal contract, the card that boosts it, is right at feudalism, so you've unlocked samurai at the same time as the card you can use to boost their production. If you're doing the samurai push, then they are your main unit, so there's not really a maximum that I would say. I'd say just get as many as you can, as many as you want to. In this game, I believe I had 5 or 6 running around, and that felt really good. In terms of fighting smarter, with Hojo, if you can, you definitely want to hug the coast. Of course, you can't always stand on a tile next to coast, but if you can, or you could do something else, then definitely standing on that tile near the coast is better. And as stated before, because they don't get combat strength penalties from being damaged, the samurai are a little more conducive to staying at the front just a little bit longer. You're less likely to get 2 or 3 shot, and they can hold their own against some damage a little longer, especially if the unit they face is damaged. The next step in terms of melee units are going to be musketmen, are going to require niter, so once you've teched for swordsman on the tech tree, you're definitely going to want to look how to get to military engineering, which is where niter unlocks. And then once you've done that, you're definitely want to get niter, because musketmen are still an upgrade over samurai. So in summary, focus a bit on culture, either get swordsman or prepare to use the card feudal contract, and you should have an army of samurai that is fairly capable of taking down another civ. The Indian Varu is a super unique, so I'll compare it with the unit that comes before and after it. The Heavy Chariot has 28 combat strength, the Varu has 40, and the Knight has 50. Note that the Varu does not promote into a Knight. With the Knight, it upgrades into a Cuirassier. The Varu has an extra sight, which I legitimately had never noticed in my games playing with the Varu, but that's because it's usually in the front and you don't really notice where exactly you have sight, but it is a nifty little bonus. And the most emblematic one, the one that everyone knows, is that it gives adjacent enemy units -5 combat strength. If you want to go for synergies, then Chandragupta is the leader for you. He can declare a war of territorial expansion after getting the military training civic, and with that he gets 2 movement and +5 combat strength for the first turns after declaring that. There aren't any major synergies in the rest of the kit. In fact, there are more so diversions, because you might want to stop off for your stepwell at irrigation, and you might want to stop off at astrology for a religion. I would say do either one or the other and then get to Varu. Do not do both and then get to Varu, because by then the Varu will be obsolete. You unlock the Varu by getting through horseback riding, so that's animal husbandry first. That should unlock horses for you, and hopefully you have a place somewhere to get a pasture, which boosts horseback riding, and in between those two lies archery. So, like with the Hul'che, you definitely get a slinger early in your build and try to get a kill with that. Even with the diversions that you will have, because you also want an encampment to boost military training, and like I said, you might want a religion, you should be able to get to Varu at least in the early classical era, and if you really beelining it, you should be able to get a Varu in the ancient era even. Since you can't upgrade into Varu, we're skipping step 3 and going straight to step 4. Where is the card for extra production? It's maneuver, and it is behind military tradition, which you want to go through anyway because you're on your way to military training. How many Varu you get kind of depends on what you want to do with the rest of the game. If you just want to do the Varu push and then hang back SimCity, you'll feel good about getting 4 Varu and not focusing as much on the other units you might want in a regular army. But paradoxically, I think that if you're going for a full domination game, do only 2 Varu, use them as support units, and focus more on your melee and ranged army. Because fighting with Varu is very tricky. You want them at the front, because that's how they give their negative effect to your enemy units, but they aren't strong enough to withstand a crossbow charge, and they aren't mobile enough to really cycle in and out if they're under attack. Because in my opinion, Varu kind of obsolete once the AI get to probably crossbows, and definitely when they get to knights. And then there's a very long time until you get to cuirassiers and can really use them again. But in summary, set yourself up well for a war of territorial expansion by getting an encampment, getting the horse pasture, get maneuver in, and build yourself a couple Varu to do the Varu rush. Finally, let's look at the Byzantine Dromon, because oh boy, this is a supremely underrated unit. it replaces the quadrireme and also unlocks at shipbuilding, and it mostly has the same stats as the quadrireme, except that it gets plus 10 combat strength against units, both on land and naval, which is a big jump from 25 to 35, and it has 2 range, which is huge. The reason the Dromon often gets overlooked is that in domination plays with the Byzantines, usually the Tachma is the star of the show with Basil, so I intentionally played with Theodorus. I didn't even have the Tachma, and she doesn't necessarily provide a huge benefit to any units, but the Byzantine Civ ability sure does. Units receive an extra 3 combat strength or religious strength for each holy site converted to Byzantium's religion, which includes your original holy city, so you instantly get plus 3 combat strength when you have a religion, and your religion is spread to nearby cities when defeating a unit belonging to an enemy civilization or city-state. That does mean you're going to divert to astrology, but that is in the top of the tree where your boats are anyway, so that's not too much of a problem. Plus, you might want to get to your harbors anyway to get to Great Admirals. Shipbuilding sits behind sailing, so you're going to want a city on the coast. From that city on the coast, you're going to want to get 2 galleys to boost shipbuilding, and then the road is clear towards shipbuilding, but like I said, you do want to get to astrology as well underway. Since the Dromon is the first of its kind, you can't pre-build it anyway, so you're looking for the card Maritime Industries, which unlocks at foreign trade. In general, I would say, by the way, that in naval games, you tend to go for Code of Laws and then focus on foreign trade, rather than go for Code of Laws and then craftsmanship. How many Dromon you get is a matter of how many tiles are open for you to attack on. It will depend on how naval the map is that you picked. I intentionally, of course, picked a very naval map, an archipelago map, and basically as many as I could have produced would have been the right answer, because the bonus of the Dromon is that because of its extra range, there are more tiles to attack from, and that means that you just want to occupy all those tiles with shooting boats. In terms of fighting smarter, the Dromon makes that possible. Like I said, you can shoot at cities from a lot more tiles, you can shoot at units, to then kill them, to convert the cities, to then get more combat strength, assuming you take Crusade, which of course you should. And as long as the AI doesn't have walls, you're shooting at it without retaliation. If a galley does come up with the 2 range, it is possible to put a galley of your own between that enemy galley and your Dromon, still shoot it. A lot easier to do a fighting retreat. If possible, you might want to get to a Great Admiral, though in my experience that is a little tough, especially at the start of your wars. And if you can pick which Great Admiral, then Themistocles with the extra production towards ranged naval units is of course the perfect match. Then you want to get experience on your units, because the last promotion on the tree, the bottom one, is extra range. Now, on the Dromon, even with that extra range, it is fun because you can shoot at cities completely without retaliation with 3 range. But the more important part is that by that time, once you get 4 promotions, you will have gotten to square rigging and to your frigates. And frigates with 3 range are an absolute nightmare to be up against. So if you can get much experience on your Dromon, you will have insane frigates, an insane post-unique unit. So in summary, after getting your religion, get those boats out, 2 galleys, and then as many Dromon as you can, get as much experience on them as you can, because that will lead to an insane post-unique unit that the AI has absolutely no defense against. So there you have it, the theory behind how to use your unique unit effectively and a couple examples how to do so. Did this help you? Then do please leave a like. If there's a unit you would have liked to see demonstrated, then do please leave a comment. In any case, you can subscribe and ding the bell so you know when the next video goes live. The very next video is the unique unit tier list. So we will see you then. Bye bye.